All right, we're going to get started, so if you can please find your seats. So good evening, everybody. I want to thank you for taking the time to come to this meeting tonight and be civically active and educated on things that are going on in the city. My name is Brian Johnson. I am the city manager here, and I am going to be joined by two individuals I'll introduce here in a second. But before I get started, a couple of housekeeping items, if you will. One is just as a courtesy, make sure your phones are on, silent or vibrate. Second is I want to make sure that we all understand what the purpose of tonight is so that you can, as I present some of this information, understand, where we go from here. Tonight is a kickoff meeting about a topic that's very important to you. You're here, very important to mayor and council, very important to the city, and that's public safety. And when I say kickoff meeting, I mean this is the beginning of what will be a long community dialogue about this issue. And why it's that way is because something that's important, mayor and council want to have feedback from you. The elected body here, city council, are all in the audience right now. I see Mayor Mason, Vice Mayor Gratwick, seeing Councilwoman Douglas, Councilman Sod, Councilman Wright, Councilman Sawyer, and then Councilman Christ. Unfortunately, he's watching it via live feed. He had a trip that was planned prior to this date, so he couldn't make it. But why that's important is because they're here to, like you, see this information and, again, start getting feedback from you on your thoughts so that at some point, late 2025 or later, depending on, when they may feel like they have enough feedback, there might be a decision. But I just want to make sure that you understand this is the very first discussion about this at all. Anybody has been, trying to guess what's going to happen or, what the city has or hasn't done. We haven't released anything because today, the purpose of it is to establish that foundational level of data, information for you to become educated on this. And so tonight's that starting point, but it's going to be a long process. This is not an issue that you can move quickly on. It takes a lot of consideration. So without further ado, let me get into this. So it's important for me to start and say that public safety, the responsibility of public safety inside of the city is the responsibility of mayor and council. They're the ones who have to decide how it's done. Is it being done great, better, who does it? It's their responsibility. There is not, there's not another governmental entity that's deciding how that's done. And because of that, city councils, even in cities that have had long-time police departments, will periodically take a deep dive to make sure that law enforcement is hitting the mark. Maybe it needs to grow. Maybe it needs to, change its focus. But city council is the one that has, the decision-making responsibility. And, I hit this point again already, but I want to hit it again. This is the start of a conversation, a community conversation, and feedback to council. There hasn't been a decision. Council's not received this presentation from me. They're here to, watch and learn from your feedback of this. But this type of thing, reviewing law enforcement, public safety, happens, periodically in all healthy organizations. Now, unfortunately, before we get into law enforcement specifically, I'm forced to take one step back and talk about something that only new cities oftentimes have to talk about, and ours in particular is, some of you may have remembered back in 2011 into 12, when the decision on whether to incorporate the city, that discussion was happening. And there was this concept of a limited service city, City Light, which is essentially a charter that spelled out, in the case of Peachtree Corners, spelled out 3 services, which in Georgia you have to be able to provide to even be able to, incorporate as a city, but 3 services. And in our case, at the time, based on a lot of people who had a lot more experience in government than any of the elected officials who were thinking about running for office, but our charter had a restriction that said the city shall only provide 3 services. At the time, it was solid waste, code enforcement, and zoning. And the thought was, that's it. That's the only 3 that the city can provide, shall only. Problem with that, as the Georgia General Assembly realized shortly after we were created, is that there's only one type of city in Georgia, home rule city, and when that city is incorporated and the city council has been seated, they are the decision-making body on all this. Cities can't rely on others. Good example would be, streets, which I believe was the first service that came up. Street maintenance was not one of the 3. But shortly after the city was created, the county was like, all right, we were maintaining all the streets except the state routes before you were a city. Now we're going to, let you have your streets. We'd like to maintain a few, but the rest of them are yours. Well, if the city shall only do 3 and streets weren't on it, it's creating a problem. And that's what the General Assembly, determined. Why that's important is, somebody might be like, why are we even, you can't even consider anything else because the charter restricts the city from doing that. Unfortunately, you really can't have charters that do that because, police is another example. What happened if, Gwinnett didn't want to provide police? The city can't look around and be like, well, who else is going to do it? That's, once you become a city council is the governing body. So for anybody who was thinking, we can't, I just wanted to make that clear that we moved past that back in 2018 when our charter was amended. All right. So really the issue on the table, why we're going to talk about having had a study done, is really essentially what we have here is in 2012, when the city was created, city council at the time was like, we'd like to continue to use Gwinnett, the police department, just like they had been providing police protection prior to us becoming a city. Since Gwinnett is not a, department or division of the city, they're an outside organization, we have a contract with them. And we're essentially, paying for a service. And so it's going to cut, the question tonight is it better one or the other? There are pros and cons of each, which we'll discuss, but that is our governing document for Gwinnett to provide police protection is our intergovernmental agreement we have with them that allows them to charge a special police millage rate to property owners inside of Peachtree Corners in return for them providing police protection, as the IGA says, the same as it provides the residents of the remainder of unincorporated county. And so that's the arrangement. That is the governing document of, how police is done. So it is a contractual if you will, arrangement. They don't, they have their own command structure, which is why, considering it almost like renting versus owning is, kind of the question tonight. It is important also that considerations of any change, which again, hasn't even been, beyond tonight discussed, but any consideration of this has a 4-year planning horizon. So, much like the old adage of, hard to turn a battleship quickly, any decision that the city council might make to change the current status quo it would not go into effect for 4 years after that decision was made. So this is not a quick decision, which is why, we're taking our time to do it. But that is an important point, because as we think about this, none of this would be, if there was a decision, go into effect for 4 years. So for those of you who don't understand, so that you can know how we're situated, the map on the left is Gwinnett County, and all the blue is the responsibility of Gwinnett County Police Department. And that's all the areas they're responsible with. Very large county, almost 1 million people, very big, department with a lot of resources, a lot of responsibilities. The one on the right is just breaking the way Gwinnett breaks their police districts up. And you can see on, the far southwestern part of the county is where we are. And West Precinct is, basically wraps around city of Norcross is. That's the precinct that Peachtree Corners is in, and the resources that Gwinnett provides to West Precinct is in turn the resources that come to us. Now, where this starts to become more, call it personal, is when we break down West Precinct. A couple things to keep in mind is, as the precinct is broken up, without getting into, sectors and zones or whatever, you can essentially consider it divided by I-85. The officers assigned to patrol one or the other come out of each shift. We find ourselves in this area, which does include, 3 areas that are not our city limits. This is Berkeley Lake. This are 2 areas of unincorporated county. And as city council, with responsibility of the city, but just the city, there are certain data points that are important, and there are certain concerns that residents raise to the city. And, when you get a lot more crime happening outside our city limits, and Gwinnett has a responsibility for the whole precinct, sometimes that means that resources have to go where, resources are demanded. And they got a hard job to, deal with a growing county and all the problems that people always bring with them. But as West Precinct, as being a part of West Precinct, this is an important thing that has come up and for us to consider. Now, crime itself, I think it's important for us to, or for you to all understand that, crime is pretty stable here. It's fair to say that, we can consider Peachtree Corners as a whole as a safe community. It certainly has areas that are, have a little bit more need for attention than others. But, I don't think anybody looks at crime rates and is like, oh, we have some crime, but it's cool. I mean, it's stable, but it is still too high. And it, depending on which type of crime, some of them are growing, and, we've got to, come to the realization that growing communities have, the problems with growth. But it's not what it is what council's going to be at some point considering is not just crime rates. It's also, is there a situation where better response times, more officers assigned per shift, shrinking the patrol area a little bit and, creating a scenario where the officers stay inside the city limits all the time? Would that make us safer? Would that make us better? And so, not but 2 years ago or so, recognizing that as a community we're growing, having had certain instances that had come up with the city, with enforcement of laws, or local or state, we realized that there was a gap of public safety coverage when Gwinnett County informed us that they're either unable or unwilling to enforce local ordinances, meaning city laws that the city created. Example of that would have been, we had an incident here a couple years ago where the owner of a property found a loophole in our code at the time that we have a restriction against rentals in homes for less than 30 days. Okay, that's to prevent like Airbnbs and Verbos from coming in and operating. Well, the language at the time was more specific to the inside of the buildings, and there was a house with a pool, and somebody was like, oh, I can just rent the exterior of the house. And this neighborhood one evening had scores of cars just show up in the neighborhood, park on the street, and go to a big pool party with a DJ and all that stuff. And they called police. Gwinnett responded, but officers showed up and they said, we can't enforce the city's noise ordinance. And so they were kind of like, there's nothing we can do. And that frustrates residents when they're like, wait a second, there's a law that would prevent this loud party and from happening. So mayor and council, rightly so, we're like, we got to do something about things like that. Also about, the chronic shortage of, officers that Gwinnett's forced to deal with and that they're working through. But when they're short-staffed, less resources means it's harder to provide. And so the thought was we would create city marshal's office and we created 3 positions, filled them with 3 individuals who are all post-certified former Gwinnett PD officers, as coincidence would have it, and they would be able to enforce both local ordinance and state law since they are a function of the city, and they could maybe be a force multiplier for Gwinnett. They don't have to respond to 911, which frees them up. They could potentially go and do things that Gwinnett's unable, to do merely because they are the primary police department and have to respond to calls for service. So that was our thought. And it's still, we're still, working towards getting that, a good balance, but we are, we have been faced recently with, a couple things that make it harder for us. One is our marshals are required, just like any of you, if they wanted any information, and especially since they're also, law enforcement officers and serving that function, maybe they could have a little bit more, rapid access to information than those of us who aren't, but they have to go through the normal open records request process for incident reports. They were denied, as well as the city of Sugar Hill asked for the ability to see, not change, but see the computer-aided dispatch information so that they would know where Gwinnett County police officers were so that they could avoid stepping on their toes or maybe looking to support their efforts, and that um, they haven't been granted that. And then also, Gwinnett has video cameras on certain roadways that they use for various reasons, but law enforcement can use them when there's crime in the area and they may want to look at it. Well, we used to have access to it, now no longer do, even though conversely, we have a couple hundred cameras in the city and we definitely want them to have access to it. So the frustration out of not being able to get that symbiosity between the marshals and police made us start thinking, all right, is there another option? Maybe there isn't one, but might there be? And so what we realized is for us to truly know if we as a city have the ability and to afford and what size police department, we did realize one thing is we aren't the experts on evaluating that. We wanted to bring a third party organization in to come do it for us. And so we brought in an organization called CPSM, and I'm going to introduce you to their lead consultant on the team that came in and did this assessment. But Jared Burgoyne is a retired police chief himself, retired police chief of San Bernardino, California. So a very large city, 250,000 people, and retired. And he's part of teams that go around to cities and provide analytical and other consulting services for cities that are looking to do various things. These guys are experts in the field, and they came in and they provided us what Jared's going to show you, and then we'll talk about his findings. So, Jared.
Thanks, sir. Is my mic on? Can everybody hear me? Very good. Well, good evening, everybody. As Mr. Johnson said, my name is Jared Burgoyne. I am a retired police chief out of Southern California. I did about a 29-year career wearing a uniform. Retired in 2019 after about 6.5 years at the helm of my agency. Since that time, I have worked on both the international stage as well as the domestic stage within the United States, doing analysis work on law enforcement agencies. CPSM is well known within the industry for doing public agency safety analysis pieces with a focus on a quantitative piece that helps agencies get better through the use of data. When you talk about building a police department, when you talk about how many officers do we need, a lot of people will look to metrics that might compare themselves to other cities, that might compare themselves to an officer per 1,000 formula, something of that nature. We believe very strongly that it should be based upon work. Two cities of equal size could have extraordinarily different workload profiles and crime profiles. And so the same number of officers doesn't necessarily fit in both cities. So the purpose of our study, the reason we were brought in is simply to provide an independent analysis to the city of Peachtree Corners on if you were to elect to start your own police department, what does that police department need to look like? Or at least within parameters, what does it need to look like? And that is important because you don't want somebody to underestimate it with the idea of making it look affordable only to not have enough resources to police the city. And equally important that you don't want somebody to create a Cadillac version of policing that you may or may not need in the city. So our goal was simply to provide a perspective on what the data says, on what size the department can or should be. And then we use our experience based upon working with agencies all over the country as to, once you determine that, how should it really be distributed? We were not asked to assess the performance of the Gwinnett County Police Department. We did work with them to get much of the data, spoke with many of them as part of this study, but in no way, shape, or form is this any type of analysis of the performance of policing as it currently exists in the city, solely to evaluate what the future may look like. How do we go about doing this? We use a data collection piece. So we asked Gwinnett County Police Department for a massive dump of what we call their CAD data, computer-aided dispatch data, to understand what is actually happening in the city. And out of that, we output a large number of graphs and forms and all types of data. I believe the city has put up on their website or made available essentially a copy of the study. It's over 100 pages if you enjoy reading that type of thing. The data piece that we use itself, there are two generally accepted metrics for determining police workload with the use of data. One is called the 30-30-30 model. The other is called the rule of 60. Both models have their similarities. Both models typically get to a very close number within one another. For our purpose, we normally use what we refer to as the rule of 60. The rule of 60 has two parts. Out of the total size of the agency, at least 60% of your sworn resources should be dedicated to the patrol function within the agency. And then the remainder go to the other supporting functions in the agency. And of that 60% that is assigned to the patrol function, those individual patrol officers, their workload should not on a regular basis exceed 60% of their allotted workday. That's not to say that they should have 40% free time to not do anything. That is simply a balance that is designed to have officers busy enough that you're getting bang for your buck, so to speak, but also ensuring that those officers aren't so busy that they don't have time to do the other things that the department or the city may want them to be. And it comes from studies that have been done that shows that once officers exceed that saturation index of 60%, they start to shut their brain off of doing any proactive work. The mindset is why would I make that traffic stop? Why would I go do those extra patrols? Why would I do this extra work knowing that the next call is coming in any second and I'm not going to have time to finish it or do that? So you look for that balance in making sure that officers have capacity to handle the emergencies, but also have the capacity to do some of the extra work that is needed. After we build the patrol piece, the idea is determine what that minimum staffing and patrol would be. We then build the supervision structure on that to make sure that you have the right ratios of supervisors to officers, the right management structure to support that, and then build the rest of the department around it, all designed to support that patrol function, which is known to be the busiest part or the most visible part of a department. And I should point out, we have a term up there called relief factor. What that means is that once you've determined what the staffing should be, no employer, nobody ever works at 100% staffing all the time. People have vacation time, police officers get sick, police officers get injured. There's a whole number of things that might take an officer, training, that might take an officer away from the street to have to do other things. And so you need to make sure you've got enough of that relief factor built in so you're not spending too much on overtime to maintain those minimum staffing numbers. So within the report that we produced, as I said, it's over 100 pages, there are a ton of graphs and figures in there. I put a couple of them in here. Out of the data that was provided by the Gwinnett County Police Department, there were almost 18,000 events that were identified within the CAD system that were identified as workload. And out of those, there's a balance of about 55% of those events that came from community-initiated calls for service. People that called the police and said, I need an officer at this location for a particular reason. And then about 43% of all the incidents were officer-generated. An officer that called out a traffic stop, an officer that stopped a pedestrian, an officer that initiated some form of work. That is a normal workload balance that we see in agencies all over the place. I do want to point out this term zero on scene, because that may be confusing to some folks. What zero on scene means is that there was something that was found within the data that had a very, very short time period on it, typically less than 30 seconds. So what often happens is an officer out on patrol may tell dispatch, hey, will you log an extra patrol at the intersection of 1st and Main, but then show me back in service. Dispatcher enters it real quickly to document that that happened, but no time was recorded within that incident. So we identify that within the data, there were 336 incidents, or just under 1 time per day that data existed. We take all of that data, all of the other graphs and forms that are in the report that have to do with the types of calls that were responded to, the amount of officers involved in that response, the amount of time on average that those calls took. And out of that, we build a complete workload profile based upon 24 hours of a day to see what the data looks like. We specifically separate it into weekends and weekdays because police work often changes based upon weekend workload versus weekday workload. We also separate it based upon season. Some cities can be significantly busier than others in the winter versus the summer. So within the report, you'll see summer and winter, and you'll see weekdays and weekends. The graph here that you're looking at on the left-hand side is the number of units, and at the bottom is the hours of the day, so essentially from midnight to midnight. And what that shows is your community-initiated work and the amount of officers required to do that. So if we take 12 o'clock, for instance, right about here, you can see that about 1.5 officers was busy on community-initiated work, and about 1.5 officers were busy doing proactive work. This is averaged out over an entire year in many ways. To, on average, 3 officers were physically busy with work in Peachtree Corners at that time of the day, either on the weekends or the weekdays. Once we establish that, we need to establish the administrative time. Within the data that we received from Gwinnett County, we did not have a snapshot into the real administrative time that an officer takes, which is workload. Administrative time can be anything from writing police reports that wasn't captured on the initial call to doing maintenance on your equipment, whatever it might be, attending briefing. Now, we know, based upon 450 plus studies that we've done around the country, that on average, that administrative time for an officer is 20 to 25% of their day. So we had to make some assumptions based upon some of the gaps in the data, that above the workload is an approximation of about another 20% associated to reach staffing levels. Once we get to that, if we can assume that we've got 100% of the data, then we can establish the rule of 60 and the number of officers required there. And then on top of that, we do what's referred to as the relief factor that I talked about before. The relief factor is simply that over and above staffing that needs to be scheduled every single day to ensure that you have appropriate coverage without the excessive use of overtime. Industry average, again, is anywhere from 20 to 30%. To reach that, we put in there requires active supervision. You have to have those supervisory ratios to make sure that time is not being abused and people that are not taking excessive amounts of time off or doing other things that impact that relief factor. Out of that, we built a profile that the patrol unit within the city of Peachtree Corners could be staffed with 2 lieutenants that manage 2 separate teams, 4 sergeants, 4 corporals, and 28 officers. We built a sergeant corporal model into it because when you've got that few sergeants, only 4, that's 1 per shift that would be scheduled to be on duty at any given time. That sergeant has to be able to have the capacity to be away at times as well, but you still need supervision. So many agencies will use a corporal rank as a hybrid working officer / supervisor. So that's the way we built the model. And then on top of that, about 28 officers. We built the profile based upon a 12.5-hour workday. It's just a small example of one of the schedules that we put in of what it looks like. That particular schedule typically requires a little bit of mandatory overtime every couple of weeks during the work cycle. Out of that, we built the structure. So what I just talked about was the patrol piece that's right here. It's 2 lieutenants that answer to a patrol commander. We put captain, major, it's different things based upon areas of the country or how they elect to build their rank structure. But essentially those 2 lieutenants will report to a patrol commander. And then you have the 4 squads that I made reference to. Each of them are run by one of the 4 sergeants. And then we put a piece in here for traffic based upon discussions with the city and an understanding of what some of the priorities were, is to have a little additional capacity in the traffic arena. We also built the investigative side over here with investigations, a crime analysis unit, some task force officers that we understand are very common within the region. We built a proactive team that we refer to as a site team, a community intervention team, and then the existing code enforcement function that currently works here would fall under the police department under this proposed model. And then we built a support services division where we look to have that managed by a civilian employee, so a non-sworn person, with records, property, and evidence, as well as all the ancillary things related to quartermaster, fleet, those things that staff a police department. And then in addition to that, answering directly to the chief of police up here is essentially the internal affairs, the policy part of the department, as well as the training component of the department, so that you can manage those functions and answer directly to the chief. So, investigative staffing, we had made requests for current investigative workload from Gwinnett County. That data was not available during the time of our assessment. We worked upon reported crime information that was provided, extrapolated that crime information, averaged out what caseloads would or should be, built it based upon IAC CP metrics that are designed to estimate the maximum number of cases that should be assigned to a detective within a year period. And the staffing that we came up with there was 1 lieutenant commanding the unit, 1 sergeant supervising the unit, 2 detectives on crimes against persons, 2 detectives on property crimes, 1 crime analyst, with a total of 7 assigned to that function. Other considerations: you need to have a records department, you need to have somebody that takes care of those administrative things of all the work that is ultimately produced, handles UCR reporting, those types of things that are necessary for police work. You have to have a property and evidence section. We also built in some options within the work that we put together. And this was based upon discussions with agencies within the region, discussions with Peachtree Corners on what some of the priorities are. Within that, we built in an optional canine unit, an optional traffic unit of 2 officers. We built in the task force operations, and then we also put in some tactical unit considerations into the report, because every agency needs to have some capacity to handle tactical incidents that are beyond the capacity of patrol. Out of all that, we built an agency of approximately 68 people altogether. Out of that are 55 sworn people. That is inclusive of the optional units, if the city chooses to use that. And then the remaining 13 come from the civilian or administrative structure of a proposed agency. This is another graph that's included in the report that breaks down those 68 positions, but where they would be located and assigned within the function or within the agency. The things with an asterisk here are those optional positions that we discussed: the community intervention team, the canine team, as well as the traffic team. And then we also put in here this double asterisk is essentially an IT specialist. Every department's got to have somebody that's going to specialize in the IT functions and the systems within the agency. That's a double asterisk because it can certainly be a shared resource with other areas of the city, of city operations. And so I encourage everybody to take a look at the report. If you enjoy data, if you like looking at the type of thing, there's lots of fascinating info. If you don't like it, you might find it to be a little bit boring, but I will be here to follow up with any questions when this is done. Right?
So when Jared and the team got done with the report submitted to the city, we happened to have an individual that, was a resource for me to say, all right, take this report and tell me what you would do if we were going to do something local. And we happen to have somebody on our staff, Chief Edward Restrepo, who I would like to congratulate, just got hooded with his PhD in criminal justice yesterday. So if Dr. Restrepo would come up here, he's a retired Gwinnett police officer, but what's important maybe is he's also, aside from being our current chief marshal, but the most recent former commander of West Precinct itself. So, I asked him to take that data and create what he would say would be out a city department. And Chief, take it away.
Wonderful. Good evening, everyone. Your presence here says a lot, that you care, you want to get additional information for that with the city. We're grateful, so thank you. What you're looking at here is kind of what, after Jared and his team went through, and us keeping in mind wanting to be good stewards with taxpayer money, right? And so we were able to shave off some positions we thought we didn't need immediately if the proposed would move forward. So in that, essentially, he had carved out 55 total officers with the ones that you saw with the asterisk. So what we decided to do was to bring those costs down, and what we ended up doing is decreasing by 3 officers, and that was the 2 traffic officers. So for those that don't like getting tickets, maybe not as bad, right? So 2 traffic officers less, and then one of the CIT officers, which in California and where Jared's from is a community impact officer. We tend to call them community response teams or community, and those CRTs is what we kind of talk here locally in Georgia about. So we got rid of one of those, took us to a total of 52. But at the end of the day, the bread and butter of an organization, a police organization, is obviously its uniform patrol capabilities. At the end of the day, you call the police, you want them to get there as quickly and as fast as possible, right? All the other things that go with it, excellent as well. community engagement, all these different things that officers can do, the proactiveness, the strategies, all those things. But at the end of the day, when you need the police, you want them there as quickly as possible. So that being said, Jared and Brian did a really good job covering the right side of that slide there. I'm going to speak specifically to what you're seeing on your left side, and that is actually uniform officers 24 hours a day. So that left side basically covers 2 days. Let me go to the next slide here. I'm sorry. Covers, you'll see Team Alpha and Team Charlie. So that's 24 hours of policing there. So what you'll see from the rank of corporal down, that's about 7, 8 officers, just depending on day watch and night shift. And that transposes over to the other. So that's what it would typically look. This is what you would typically have on the road in uniform from the rank of sergeant down patrolling the streets of Peachtree Corners at any given time. If we go here, and Brian did a really good job of touching this, but I also got to kind of lay the premise or the foundation. So the lighter yellow on there is a piece of Berkeley Lake, and then you have the Indian Trail Beaver Ruin corridor, and then the last one on the left is the 121 zone, which is Buford Highway to the county line and all the way to 85 southbound. That's what Gwinnett County Police kind of deems as the Peachtree Corners area, and I say that because I'm going to show some rosters that will show things a little differently, and I just wanted to put that out there. So this is what it would look like if you take all the unincorporated areas out and it's specific to Peachtree Corners. Obviously, a much smaller area to patrol there. So going back to the first slide, you'll see this is a 24-hour period of officers. Now, to the right are the rosters. These are basically what the supervisors, the commanders of those shifts put together as far as how they're going to allocate officers assigned to those areas. This was pulled for 2023, and a lot of the data that Jared and we extracted and got, we basically randomly picked some. And consistently throughout the year, we saw 3 and 4 officers that are specifically assigned to Peachtree Corners on a 365-day period. Now, I will say, when I spoke about 121 zone on this map, I did not include 121 zone because you can see clearly that 121 zone is not part of Peachtree Corner Circle. That's a big geographical area that doesn't pertain to Peachtree Corner Circle. However, it is considered for the Gwinnett County Police Department to be part of Peachtree Corners patrol areas. So that being said, if you look in comparison, you're looking at 3 to 4 on average for 2023. As of about a month ago, we pulled a month, and they were teetering on 4, maybe 5. Now it depends whether it's corporals or whether they count their corporals as supervisors. So there's a lot of nuances and little things that could change that. But that roughly on average is what you're currently getting from the Gwinnett County Police Department to what the proposed for a Peachtree Corners Police Department would look like. Good. Thank you.
So have Jared, his team come in, taking data like call volume, geographic area of crime, so on and so forth, and come up with what he and his team believe would be a right-sized city police department. Had our chief marshal look at it, tweak it a little bit to say, all right, this is the structure that I would like if were this to happen. So now to take that and be like, all right, how much is it going to cost? Now we're starting to get into, we have a structure that, might be in comparison to something. The city might have this second option. And so, one way, and it's really less about, say, Peachtree Corners specifically or Gwinnett County specifically. It's a little bit more like smaller, more focused department versus larger, more heavily resourced, but larger department. So it's really about that. And you just go down the list of like, all right, who's would be better for continuity of service? Obviously Gwinnett, they're doing it. There would be no disruption, no change. That's a better, a better option. Local control, obviously, if it was a city department, city council's controlling it directly, not through intergovernmental agreement. Then, on-duty presence, you've seen what this right-sized department would have. And, a couple things on there, you see that remaining inside of our city limits. And, doing so means that response times would improve because you wouldn't have officers that had to respond from parts outside of our city limits. But, a big one for, a large department is the economy of scale. I mean, you can't, there's no way a smaller department, like a city department, would be able to compete with Gwinnett County when it comes to cost per officer, because they have that economy of scale. The shift coverage, you've seen how many, the size department that recommended how many would be assigned to start the shift, which would be more obviously community engagement. When you have a smaller area, it's easier. Currently, our city council members know you, the Peachtree Corners community, better than your county commissioners. Nothing against the county commissioners, but when they represent 200 to 250,000 people, it's a lot of people to be, having a relationship with. So these kind of pros and cons are not, really uncommon. You're seeing this. Obviously, we talked about the local ordinance issue, but, specialized units. I mean, Gwinnett definitely has in-house specialized units that a small department like, Peachtree Corners would never have. That's not to say that we wouldn't have access to them, or that we oftentimes need some of these units like SWAT or, a gang unit all that often. But Gwinnett does have it in-house. Nobody's going to ever be able to compete with them on that. So there are, still things. Budget, obviously, some of you I've seen at our budget hearings. I'm not sure you've ever been, at the counties. It's just, again, bigger organizations, less, it's harder to become knowledgeable about what's going on, and that goes for everybody. When you are smaller, you can flex, you can, change, you can adopt things quicker. But also when you don't have things in-house and something big happens and you have to use other organizations to surge, it makes it more difficult. I mean, county the size of Gwinnett is going to have resources that, just like that, they can move. The city department would never have that. These kind of things are not, really specific to Gwinnett or Peachtree Corners. A little bit more just like county, city, or bigger, smaller. But it does show you that there are pros and cons of making any change. Nobody should be like, oh, that's an easy decision. It's not. Now, you've seen, the decision-making paradigm that we've used to get to this point. Question, is usually pretty quick. How much would it cost? So CPSM did go through and do a call it a rougher, slightly more general budget on what it would cost for the department size that Jared and his team recommended we would have if the city decided to do this. And then our finance department, some others took those numbers and ran them to ground. So these are not numbers that we're just like, well, we threw a dart at a dartboard with numbers and came up with it. We would have upfront cost. So, that's important to know. This doesn't just happen organically. Police cars don't just materialize, or, equipment. That would be the cost. We have a pretty good idea about this because we outfitted the marshals not too long ago. So these are pretty updated prices. This would be something the city would be able to absorb internally. There wouldn't need to be any kind of, community extra, input. It's important to note that as a city that doesn't have some other functions, given that city, aside from the city light, we already talked about, does have a more outsourced service delivery model. We still outsource quite a few services through third parties. Our public works, street maintenance is done through a private company that we contract with. Code enforcement, stormwater. Those are things that we outsource. Because of that, we don't have a lot of city employees, so we don't actually have an HR department. And if you did end up pulling 65, hiring 65 people for a department, you would need that. We also don't have municipal court enough for us to have full-time court staff. We only need it because it's really more like environmental court, at least prior to the marshals getting in, where it was code enforcement, forcing, environmental code, like, exterior things. So we only need to do it once a month. I mean, if we had a police department, we would at least have to have municipal court once a week. So we did have to build in, those two functions, which does add to cost. We wanted to be clear about that. When you consider these categories, as we broke it down and ran them all in, and, I didn't put, all the detail. These are obviously aggregates of these line items, but the operating expense for a city to police department would be $12.1 million. Today's, costs and numbers. So that's what it would cost. All right, great. Well, how would the city pay for $12.1 million operating? So you break it down into, we have a couple of ways to get to file number one. We got our operating budget. That's what the city would need every year. And then we had to add court and HR. But then when you have municipal court and you do have officers writing citations of some sort, there are fines that come in, just like that happens at Gwinnett. You got a speeding ticket or other citation, you're going to go up to the county and, have that taken care of. Having a municipal court, then, revenue comes with it. So our estimate on revenue gets backed out, and then our city marshal's office that currently exists, the need for it would go away. So that budget would get absorbed. So $11.2 million would be the number that the city is not currently collecting or have a revenue stream dedicated to, that the city would have to find if this was an actual viable option for council. So if you currently look at our property tax digest, we have 4.2 billion and some change for our assessed value. When you back out all the value offset exemptions, homestead, Freeport, our taxable assessed value is 3.24 billion. The current millage rate that you are already paying for police to Gwinnett, 2.9 mils, is currently generating 9.4. Now, that's not, you back up, that's not the 11.2 the city would need. So we're short, if this is a viable option, by, a little over $1.5 million because of that. And why that 9.4 is important is because you already are paying that, and you have been for a long time. And if the city did decide to stand up a city department, that 2.9 mils that you're paying to Gwinnett would go away, and or you could consider it get transferred to the city, however you want to look at it. But that's why that's important. But 9.4 is not, on that right size department, is not the dollar we need. So if the city wanted to do this, it would need to raise the millage above 2.9, with the assumption that the exemptions that you already have, like your, homestead and value offset exemptions that lock your home value for tax purposes in, if the city continued to honor that, so that didn't change, it would need to go up, to 3.5. So the bottom line to this really is, if you believe that having more officers assigned to start a shift, more, a smaller patrol area for those officers to not be leaving the city limits to go respond to crimes elsewhere because their area of responsibility would not include anything outside the city. And you thought that was, and then obviously response times go down. If you think that's, something that you would like to have here with that size department, that's what you just have to consider. And that, it's important to note that that is just in a quick comparison from millage rate to millage rate. There are certainly other ways to get to this. 4 years is a long time. So, this would, if city council even decided to do something like this, it's a while before it would happen. So, this is essentially what mayor and council want you to take away tonight is kickoff means, just that. There's going to be a number of other opportunities. Maybe some I don't even know, and city council wants to have more, meetings or whatever. But this is something that we all have to consider very carefully. It at least what the purpose of tonight was to show that it is an option. Whether it's better or not, there's pros and cons of each one. So the important thing is this. Now, I would, before we open it up for anybody who has, questions, comments, concerns, whatever, this is important is, the call to action is two things. One is get educated. If you feel like, you're already there tonight, great. If not, our website, our communication director built a specific page for this. And on that page, when we leave tonight, the study that Jared and his team did all on there, my PowerPoint will be on there. A video recording of this meeting will be on there for anybody who missed it, either in person or live. So I'd encourage you to do it. And then there's going to be a survey on there, which is one easy way to provide feedback to council. Sure, you could do it in email. You could see them. There's a lot of ways you could let your elected officials know, but the survey does kind of have areas that we really, it's a good way for us to get information that's very specific to aspects of this versus, you saying yay or nay, or, I'd like it, but. So I encourage you to take the survey, but if nothing else, just provide feedback to your elected officials. They want to know how you feel about this before they want to actually have any official consideration. And to their credit, you should be very happy, about that. This is the way these processes should go, which is they have not had any official debate, consideration at all. They wanted to hear from you first. They wanted to give you time. So 4-6 months, maybe even longer if they decided they didn't feel like they knew how you felt. It's a good amount of time for you to get smart on it, talk to them, and let them know how you feel. So one day they could be in a position that they could say, you know what we've got, it's good. Or, we go a different route, but at least all of us go into it with our eyes wide open, and that's the most important part. So that being said, while you all are here, even though the decision is a long time, we want to open the floor for anybody, again, that has questions, comments, concerns. We're going to bring this up here, and so that we're not walking around. And if you want to get up, we're just going to have you get queue over on the left, so you're not standing in front of somebody, and then just get up here and, again, just remember your elected officials are in the audience. They can hear you, and see if we can answer any questions.
You good?
Hey, Lewis, do you want to turn it a little bit more that way? Yeah. All right. So, hey, we're ready to let's respect those who have something to say, question. Go
Fantastic.
ahead.
Thank you. My name's Alexander. I have been a resident of Peachtree Corners for 5 years now. I'm a small business owner. I pay my Peachtree Corners small business tax as well. Great presentation. First thing I'd like to say is that I want to recognize that while we are discussing an important issue, these officers go out every single day and put their lives on the line to keep our communities safe. And regardless of what decision we make, it matters. And for that, we say thank you. First thing that I'd like to point out is I think that if the city was decided to do this decision, we can do it for less than the 11.3 that the city is proposing. I think that a 68-man department is actually overestimating the number that we could use, especially with 4 years of artificial intelligence increasing the efficiency of administrative tasks. But even if we decide not to do that, we're in a position where we do have leverage over the county. The county wants the $10 million that we have. I propose that even for an immediate solution to the issue that we're trying to solve, if we can use that to give a 6-month trial where Gwinnett County has an opportunity to increase the number of officers, which we currently are getting, which is about 4, where they leverage a half a person. They have an officer that rotates in and out. If we do that and we allow them to see if they improve, maybe we have a room for it. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
First of all, thank you all for your presentation tonight. Appreciate it. Couple questions and some statistics to read to you. I'm sorry. So Gwinnett County provides for us right now the following units of protection: homicide, detectives, gang unit, vice squad, drugs and narcotics unit, CSI, K9, accident investigation unit, DUI task force, and aviation unit. Gang, bomb squad, federally funded, that's not in the equation. How many of these different units will be provided for us by Peachtree Corners Police Department?
Well, by the department, not many of them. Would we be able to have access to them from third-party organizations? Certainly, maybe not for free, but it's, those units and the specialized units internal to a department are certainly an advantage that Gwinnett has. A lot of those specialized units we haven't needed or see here all that often. We don't need SWAT all that often, or, gang unit, or some we do. But my point is, those, whether it's through mutual aid, it's through another organization, they're available to city departments. We're not the only city that, doesn't have those internal. We did this. But no, I don't know of any other than maybe K9 or, yeah.
So in the proposal, what you didn't see, just for the sake of time, there are things that are built in. So we would have one dedicated officer to go to the Gwinnett Metro Task Force, which is a task force run by the sheriff's office. And they do human trafficking, they do narcotics, they do gangs. So one would be assigned there, and that would come with all those resources from there. So that's that part. And then there's certain things that are baked into the service delivery strategy that Gwinnett has to provide, like those big ticket items that you said. So there's that. And then mutual aid amongst neighboring jurisdictions, that would be another component of where you fill those gaps in, for sure.
But at the end of the day, whether they are internal at Peachtree Corners Police Department or rented, none of these are guaranteed, correct?
There's some that are guaranteed for sure. We bake those in for sure.
Some of them.
Yeah, some of them, not all.
Okay.
That's correct, sir.
Okay. So a couple other numbers I want to run by you here. City of Duluth, 52 sworn officers with a budget of $11.9 million a year, and 622. What it boils down to is one law enforcement officer per 622 residents of Duluth. Duluth has a resident right now of 32,000. This is based on 2023, but Duluth has 32,350 residents. Lawrenceville has 87 sworn officers with a police budget of $17.8 million and an estimated population of 31,000. Norcross has 52 sworn officers with a budget of 7.7 million and 18,000 residents. Peachtree Corners has 42,000 residents as of 2023, or possibly 2025. 55 sworn officers with 42,000 residents. You're looking at one officer for every 763 residents in Peachtree Corners. That is higher than the other nine city police departments in our county. And if you look at the ratio of police officers to the population of Peachtree Corners, you're looking at an annual budget that would exceed $18 million. Those numbers right there do not even equate to what you presented.
Can I chime in? I think that Jared might be able to explain that a little bit more, because the ratios that you're talking of is not the best way to allocate manpower. It's how he spoke of the rule of 60 and using data specific, which is the better way of calculating those manpower decisions. Jared?
Yeah, so I started my presentation off with essentially highlighting that different places have different ways to calculate their staffing. We strongly encourage cities and communities to make their staffing determinations based upon data. Now, in those particular agencies, I have no idea what their data says. I don't know what their CAD calls are. I don't know what the workload percentages are. We took ours based upon the raw data that was provided by Gwinnett County Police Department, and then applied those workload metrics to it to come up with the numbers that we established. We did it to some degree in a vacuum without trying to compare Peachtree to any other community in the area. It was solely based upon the reported workload here.
And it's that very point that is important, is comparing departments across cities is really hard to get apples to apples comparison. They differ in everything from crime, problems or rates to funding, streams. Some of them supplement it with different, other, funding streams, which allows them to put more money into departments. Others don't. Some are bedroom communities more than others. It's really hard to compare. So when, you're like, Lawrenceville they have a different perspective. They have a different population. They have different crime rates than us. So comparing us to them is really, comparing cities to cities is not something that ultimately, allows you to get accurate numbers, which is why CPSM was asked to do it in a vacuum. Use data. We don't care what other departments are doing. That's their city council's decision. We wanted ours to be based on them crunching the data that Gwinnett has to respond to or has been responding to in our community. So that's why the comparisons, I get it, but I don't know what those cities doing, what their funding streams are, what level of importance or not importance that a city council puts on there. They're just different.
Well, just looking at the numbers, my biggest concern is we're going to be severely understaffed.
Well, and again, this is important. We don't want to be that either. I think that's a fair, thing to be concerned about, and, we certainly could meet with you, offline at another time and talk through more details, but right size, you don't want to be too much. You don't want to be understaffed either. I mean, what's the point? So I appreciate your comments.
Thank you very much.
Mm-hmm.
My name's John Wright. I just want to thank you so much for being so diligent. And we, I love Peachtree Corners. I know a lot of you do feel the exact same way. And we know that we need better policing. We really do. And he just showed us with great detail that basically $73 per household per year more. That's 20 cents a day per house, not per person, per house, right? That's nothing, okay? In other words, it's a good use.
Some
Right,
could be
right.
lower, some could be higher, but that's the average.
Right.
That's definitely
So
average.
the big picture, the big trends that we're seeing here is you can get really good. You see all those, remember all those check marks, the advantages? You know, yeah, we're going to be a little short on SWAT team, but we got these other things. Really good. This is a value. This is super value. And they've gone through a lot of detail to cost it out. They've done a really good job of estimating what you can estimate at this point. Okay, and we love the Gwinnett police officers. They're so good. They try so hard, but they got 640 miles to patrol, and we've got 16 square miles to patrol, and we can get a whole lot better. Not only that, surely all of you are familiar with small cities that have gone this route, and you know that most of the time they get really good results. That's all I'm asking you to do. Think about that. Think about the big picture. You got the advantages. The cost is only a tiny bit more, and boy, do you get a better city, and you get more safety. You get there's benefits that come from this that are inestimable. It's a great thing, and I want to thank all of you that for all the work you've done to put this together and to show it to us. And I want you to know you're going to have support. A lot of support. You're going to have door-to-door support, whatever it takes. We'll campaign. We want excellent policing. Okay?
Thank you. Thank you.
All right, that's all.
My name is David Caroling. Lived in Peachtree Corners for 30-some years. I guess first question I would have is with Gwinnett County, they have a shortage of police officers. Is that an ongoing issue? Has that been an issue for the last 2 years, 5 years? Because if it's a staffing issue that is short-term, for them to add another 20 or 30 officers, that would certainly help putting another officer in the field in our county. I also question whether or not, would we have to have a jail? The answer is no,
No.
absolutely. And where would the police station be housed?
Well, we don't obviously know that yet. You know, this is 4 years into the future, even if they decide to do it. But I would imagine mayor and council, or probably my recommendation to them would be very similar to what we did with City Hall. And a lot of other cities do it, which is we find a building, we lease space. You know, there's no, and in fact, our operating expense had a built-in lease amount because we anticipated that that's how we would do it. But it's a great question on location, because maybe the location is such that it becomes a catalyst for improvement in an area of the city that could stand to be improved because it has a police station there. So a lot of those sort of things. I do also want to talk about staffing. Look, Gwinnett is trying, and they've worked against a lot of things like COVID and, other trends that made becoming a police officer hard. So I don't want, us to not think that they're not trying. They wish that they had every position filled. The bigger any organization gets and the more positions you have, the harder it's oftentimes to fill versus a smaller one that you can focus benefits on. You can really spend more time on maybe like, all right, what will it take for us to get you here? We built in on the report, CPSM built in a salary estimate that would be, call it like the bottom of the top third of area departments. Because, I'm not going to be, or I'm going to be honest and say that just because we show assigned positions doesn't mean we wouldn't fight the same thing that all departments fight, which is retention, recruitment. So, we would do, but generally, again, city departments usually have a higher recruitment and retention rate than large departments. And just because, again, you can be more flexible and innovative in your benefits and pay. So,
And there was a number put out, 2.2 million of upfront cost. How are we calculating replacement of equipment. And is that in there? Is, the turnover of having to replace the squad cars?
Vehicles, and yes, that was built into, so we would end up having, it's usually a 5-year replacement plan on vehicles. That was part of our annual operating budget that I showed. So we did build in, again, equipment, vehicles, lease, that's all in there. Again, those numbers have been, I feel pretty confident if today was the day we did it, that those would be pretty accurate just because of how much we knew was standing up the marshals and how much time finance spent on something that already CPSM had started. So they've been run to ground pretty well.
And I guess another question is, if we spent $70 per household and helped fund additional staffing for Gwinnett County, we would probably have that extra one or two. So I don't know how that would be structured, but
I don't
certainly
either.
yeah. Okay,
Thank you.
thank you.
You mostly stole my thunder because my question was specific. I think one of the slides mentioned that Gwinnett County had 115 police officer positions with 75 filled, leaving a shortfall of 40. And I hear what you're saying about cities being able to be more flexible. I'd like to see some studies around that to see, the facts around that and understand it better. Because that's, and I think Gwinnett County has the same issue that every other county, every other city, everything in the state, and probably most of the country has around being able to get and retain police officers. It's a hard job, and I applaud everyone who's in that position. And I just want to make sure that what we're saying we can do, we can actually do, and I'm a little skeptical.
Well, so again, I don't want to, that fight is not a fight that a city department would be immune from. And, Gwinnett, I see them trying, but one maybe easy way to say it is, knowing that Gwinnett's, that fight is there, they're trying to fill positions. When we budgeted and stand up, if we did this, the salaries, one way to ensure if you got an officer who's looking to go somewhere and there would be a City of Peachtree Corners department and Gwinnett County had both openings, is for our pay to be higher than Gwinnett's. So if you're doing, that's one way, when we budgeted is, all right, who would we be competing with? Let's just make sure we would be paying more than, the bigger ones. So just to get straight to the point, that would be one way to do it.
Sure. And the next time the CAV has a price increase, they'll move right over.
We actually have a really good guest that has charted these waters already. We have the ex-retired police chief that started Dunwoody Police Department, Billy Groden. Can you ask that question? Kind of answer how that kind of looks from your perspective? Yeah, officer recruitment when they stood up the Dunwoody Police Department.
Good evening. Happy to be here to answer a few questions. And first, I'd like to say that I'll just share my experience in Dunwoody. I'm not suggesting whether you guys should start a police department or not, and I certainly would commend the Gwinnett County Police Department. They've got a great department with a wonderful reputation. When we started up the Dunwoody Police Department, first it was in 2009, so it's quite a while ago. And a lot of things have happened since then, but there was a lot of interest from local law enforcement agencies to join our department. We started with 40 sworn officers, 8 civilians. Our city was just under 40, about 48, 49,000 at the time. And it's grown today to about 70 officers and about 13 civilians. But it's a challenge recruiting and retaining folks. But one of the ways we did it was offering great pay and benefits because we wanted to attract high quality officers that were doing a great job at their current departments, but give them a good reason to, join our department. So we tried to offer good pay and benefits, highly competitive pay and benefits, as well as we did a pretty interesting thing. We did a housing stipend for them to live in the city of Dunwoody. We started at $300 a month, and now it's at $800 a month, and we have about 23, 24 officers that live in the city of Dunwoody. That we had over 500 applications for 40 positions with our department when we started. Again, a lot of things have changed since then with Ferguson, George Floyd, and COVID, and a lot of other things like that. So, sure.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you. One other quick question. I know that there are some cities and counties in the state of Georgia who have combined city-county services. Clark County and Athens, I think, are combined. Bibb County and Macon are the two that I know, just because I originally came from there. And I'm wondering if you've talked to those people about their experience in combining those and how they feel like it works or doesn't work.
Well, the one problem with Athens, Clark, Columbus, Muskogee, Macon, Bibb is it's not just police that's combined. Those are consolidated governments to where the county commissioners and city council members would have to actually agree. It's not just so it's still one command structure, one department. It's not two melded departments. They're still answering to one chief, and and there's still one chief administrative officer. So that's where you don't have it. Savannah Chatham has in the past tried to take city of Savannah and Chatham County and do it, and it flames out every so often. So it's just hard, yeah, and it's hard serving too. So anyway, a legitimate point, but those other examples, they're combined all the way up.
And I guess my other, it's more of a comment than anything, is it feels a little bit like scope creep, where you start with one thing and then it's like, oh, let's add this. Well, then it's add this. Well, we've got police, let's get fire department. And all of a sudden, we're paying way more in taxes. But I appreciate y'all being here and doing the work that you've done to present this. And I appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thank you.
Evening, Paul Lamont, lived here since '05. First, one question, how much did your work cost?
Our company,
Yeah, to do the survey, the analytics and all that, what did that
I
cost?
don't-
What did it cost Peachtree Corners? It wasn't free.
I'm a contractor for CPSM. I don't know what the company paid total price tag. or
I
what
mean,
the
did we get
company
this, all this information for free?
I don't remember what it was.
That's-
Around $100,000.
Okay, so my problem is, this is the MO for this city, okay? This seems like a solution in search of a problem, because we agree, your numbers and my numbers and everything I've researched, the crime rate has stayed pretty much steady since 2017. It bumped up after the, post-pandemic, but it's remained steady. If you compare it to Georgia and the rest of the country, we're at a relatively low crime rate. It's a nice place to live. I think we like living here. And we've been able to do that with Gwinnett County. Is there something on the horizon that we don't see, that all of a sudden we got to drop Gwinnett County, who seems to be doing a pretty good job when you look at the crime rate and the statistics? Why do we need now to spend this kind of money on a problem that's not there? I've listened. There was a question earlier, and maybe it's the creep that I feel too, but you were defending your presentation, not like I'm presenting information. You guys need to decide. I felt like you were defending it. So this is the MO for Peachtree Corners. We come up with a solution. We want to put our name on it. We don't need it. And we're going to do the studies. We're going to pay for the studies and the research. And we're going to do it anyways. This is exactly what you did with the bridge. This is what you've done with everything else. The bridge had studies. And believe it or not, the study said, you know what, that's not where it's needed. It's actually needed further south. But that's where it got built. So I honestly, from what I heard, and if I were a Gwinnett County police officer sitting here, they've been thrown in front of the bus all night. Apparently, they're not paying their officers enough because they can't do the retention. We found a better way. We have a better algorithm. I don't know how, unless you get, I don't know how the rest of the other districts are doing it, but we found a better way. And it's going to cost us more than what they're paying. So again, I don't get it. I just don't understand. When I looked at the numbers, I thought, is there a crime rate increase? Is there a problem? There isn't. I don't even know why we're here tonight. If anything, it would be a lot more efficient to pay them a few more bucks, get a couple more officers over here. You want to double the number of patrol officers and shrink the size. That's what your numbers showed. From 3 to 4 officers to 7 to 8 in less space. But they're doing the job now. I don't get it. And if the crime rate has stayed steady since 2017, we started a Marshall program. Did they have an impact? Did the crime rate go down? No. It's gone down a little bit, but it's gone down across the board, Gwinnett County. So I don't even know what we have a Marshall for other than code enforcement. So again, I'm sorry. You guys are doing a great job. Keep it up. When I moved here in 2005, I used to see their patrol cars every other day cruising through a neighborhood. I never see these guys. So, hey, thanks for everything, but I'd like to see a justification for these numbers. I didn't see it tonight.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name's Gary Beck. I've lived here for 30 years and ditto. But my point being, and really what I wanted to talk about was I feel like you've neglected letting any of Gwinnett County have any say or any input on what they may be expecting to happen in the next 4 years, as you're talking about with your program. My suggestion was, as there are 17 cities in Gwinnett County, of those 7 are incorporated. So there's 10 more cities that don't have a police department. They depend on Gwinnett County. Does that sound about right, gentlemen? Okay, all right. So the point is why doesn't the city get together with those other 10 cities and come up with a program to help them find more officers, include maybe even offering bonuses to hire more officers? Because it seems like the problem is not the crime, we just need more officers because sometimes they get pulled away to other crime scenes where they're needed. And I understand that, but we don't have a crime problem here in Peachtree Corners. We just don't. So, all right, thank you.
Thank you.
At my age, I had to sit down before I came up here. My name's Warren Davis, and I want to really commend our mayor and city council members for the leadership of putting this together. Not all cities have this. Absolutely remarkable. Because of my gray hair, I'm going to give you a bit of a historical perspective. The county police department's been policing this area for just about 50 years. We moved here because it's safe. We stay here because it's safe. I know that because 48 years ago, it was my patrol zone and it was dirt roads. It was an entirely different world. As the mayor and our council members analyze this, the weighting done to the presentation, which was absolutely excellent, is primarily driven by a patrol model. At my level court, I don't see a lot of patrol officers. I see some, but the majority of it are specialized investigators. And that's the dynamic that tends to keep people awake at night. It's the crimes against children. It's narcotics. It's overdoses. It's home invasions. I mean, business owners targeted with homing devices on their cars so they can track them home. I really think y'all made an excellent point on where our crime is originating from. And as our leaders look at this again, our crime for the most part in Peachtree Corners isn't homegrown. It's from other areas. And it's from other areas coming in. So as you balance that, I really would ask you to look at where the crime is coming from, because you've got to have that net in that area to identify those persons. Other than that, I think, since I am in the legal field, one of the things y'all omitted up there is lawyer fees. It costs a lot of money to defend the police department. How well I know. The count.
The attorney's in the audience, so
And this
he's,
is by the hour, so it is not easy.
no, yeah.
That is one thing I would encourage you to add to your list when you're doing the cost and benefits analysis, because as you said, it's very accurate. It's pros and cons. There's no right or wrong
is
answer.
correct.
The county does have a dedicated unit. You've even got an in-house legal officer. So those are some intangibles, but y'all have done an excellent presentation. I commend each and every one of you.
Thanks for your
Thank
points.
you. Yeah.
Hey guys, how you doing? My name is Ty Hanna. I live in Riverview Estates. I've lived in Peachtree Corners about 20 years. First, I know a lot of forums like this, it's a lot of criticism. I think Peachtree Corners is a fantastic place to live. I consider Mike and Ware and a lot of people, the mayor and the city council, my friends. Love what you guys are doing. Clearly respect your job, and it can't be easy, right? So I came tonight with a bunch of questions. I thought your presentation answered most of them. I have a few more that I'd just like to pose, not really looking for a response or an answer, just things I'd like for you guys to think about and maybe present to us in the future. My first question, we have an intergovernmental agreement with Gwinnett County Police Department, and I read the standards, which were they're going to police it like they police everywhere else. So my first question is, if we're not getting the services that I think we want to get, or we think we're paying for, basically, have we tried to renegotiate that contract? Or is there a way to renegotiate that contract and put in stricter standards saying we have to have so many patrol officers in our space at so much time? And if you're not, you're in violation of our contract, and let there be, repercussions to that contract. Because as a business owner, if I'm not getting something that I think I'm paying for, service I'm paying for, the first thing I do is I go look at that contract. All right. Second, I would encourage you to let Gwinnett County Police Department also speak on what they're seeing our challenges are as a community, right? I mean, you're presenting your point of view and it's respected. I'd like to hear from them and what their point of view is and what their challenges are that they're facing, not just in their own department, but with our community and what they see are issues. And the third thing, and again, just a question, not looking for an answer, I think from what I heard, our objectives are two things: to reduce crime and to have better response times. Logically, I can understand where you have more patrol officers that your response times are going to be less, but I'd like to see if you've got a statistic or some studies showing that more patrol officers actually equates to reduced crime, and not just make that assumption. Other than that, guys, great presentation. Look forward to seeing more stuff from you guys in the future.
Yeah, thank you for your points.
Lived off of Sumac Drive for 17 years. And you keep making the statement that these new police officers would never leave Peachtree Corners. It is impossible to get to my neighborhood without going through DeKalb County. I haven't seen a police officer come down my street in 6 months because I videotape it. And every time a police car goes down a street, I would get an alert. I haven't seen one in 6 months. So what makes me believe you that, things will improve in the one street that doesn't belong
in DeKalb County, and it's Gwinnett County, and you have to go through Gwinnett or DeKalb County to get there.
Your Winners Chapel
Off
area?
of Winter's Chapel.
Yeah, I mean, I won't lie, that's challenging because that road itself is in between Gwinnett and DeKalb, Dunwoody and City of Peachtree
And full.
Corners. You know, that particular case of jurisdictional, I don't think a city department would do any better than Gwinnett would be. When I say city police department would not leave the city limits, it's to respond to calls for service.
But because of how long it takes you guys to get from the other part of Peachtree Corners to us, wouldn't be any worse than what Gwinnett County's giving us right now.
Fair point.
My name's Kathy Nichols. I've been in Peachtree Corners for about 10 years, and I just wanted to say to the mayor and to the council how much I appreciate them not just voting on this and listening, because policing is the reason a lot of us live in Gwinnett County, because it's been so good, and it's hugely impactful on obviously our safety and our resale value. I'm short. I really, more than anything, I have 100 million questions darting through my head. I'm hoping I can go to that website and ask some of those questions. But I just wanted to make a comment, and that is that in my previous line of work, in my business, I worked with county government, specifically first responders, radios, 911, all that. Probably worked with dozens and dozens and dozens of agencies in the Southeast. And because of that experience, and because of what I saw, and because of some things I was able to see within those agencies, we chose to sell our almost paid for home that we were so proud of, to move to Gwinnett County, to live in Peachtree Corners, where Gwinnett County Police Department would service us. That was a massive decision. And during my tenure, I was able to professionally see some things and learn some things. And one of those was about and I'm probably gonna, sorry if I botched this, but some of the things that I learned were that Gwinnett County Police Department is one of, I think, 36 or 37 agencies in the world that has a set of credentials called CALIA. You can probably even correct me, but those credentials, if I understand them correctly, are around use of force. They are around training. And that sets our existing police department way above most of those in the world. And so we moved here because of the things that we learned and the things that we witnessed when we were in the business world. Then we moved here and had a faulty alarm system. We didn't know it was a faulty alarm system. But about 3 o'clock in the morning, my daughter's bedroom window alarm went off. And you can only imagine the fear and the panic. And we called 911. And I will tell you, I've never been more proud to be a Gwinnett citizen. I had 4 officers in my yard checking everything. There was a very quick response time. So I know we're talking a lot about response time, but my experience was that of excellence and of professionalism. The officers came inside to make sure that my husband wasn't the culprit, talked to my children to make sure everything was okay. I came from a county that was not their policy. Unfortunately, that faulty wiring happened again. It happened a second time, some months later, and we had the same experience: excellence, quick response time, professionalism. And so we have a lot of unknowns with the city police department, a lot of unknown expenses. I know there are some services we're going to lose, right? SWAT. I mean, somebody already named all those. But it just is, I appreciate the city taking a pause on it, because it certainly gives me pause, because I am concerned that we are going to end up paying more for lesser services. So thank you for listening. And I hope that I can ping you with some more questions.
Yeah, absolutely.
Hi, I'm Kate Howell, and I agree with a lot of the things that earlier people have said, including the young man Alex who spoke earlier. And I'd like to commend Gwinnett County Police Department also, and the reputation that I've read about you guys is stellar. And to emphasize what the lady before me said, as far as the recognition that they have. One of the things that I heard you say is that when there is crime in other areas, they will pull police from Peachtree Corners and pull them into the other areas. My assumption, just an assumption, is that if we have an issue here in Peachtree Corners, they would do the same thing in reverse, that they would take their staff from other areas and pull them into Peachtree Corners if we had a high risk, high crime, high threat situation. We have that kind of leverage with a group like Gwinnett County Police Department that's larger. Also, with a police department that's larger, that's supporting us, that has a very large staff versus a potential future police department that has a smaller staff. If they lose 1 or 2 or 3 or 5 people for whatever reason versus us losing 1 or 2 people, the impact for us is a lot higher, a lot more vulnerable because of the impact of staff variation in a smaller department than a larger department. They can absorb that, they can spread it out, they can manage that impact better than a small department can manage a fluctuation in staff variation. It also helps with training, sustainability, the whole subject matter expertise, best practice, that type of thing. And I heard what you said too about keeping people, better retention in a city group that's smaller than a larger group. But I still feel that that's balanced out by an organization that is larger in general, that can balance out and support that variation in staffing. You're a consultant, you could speak to that better than I could. I also look at this like, what problem are we solving? And I'm glad that you talked about that at the beginning, because those are important things. I believe in any situation, and including in Peachtree Corners, that we should always do continual assessment, analysis, and look for continual improvement. And I think you found some things here that are opportunities for improvement. So one area, of course, is to develop a Peachtree Corners Police Department. Another area, and I think Alex spoke to this, the first gentleman that spoke about taking these findings, these opportunities for improvement, and going back to I look at you guys like you guys are the Gwinnett County Police Department, but going back to the leaders and saying, here's our challenges, here's our opportunities, here are areas for improvement, what can we do? You had some very specific things, and I think those are worthy of noting and worthy of addressing. Likewise, as Alex had said, and I don't know who Alex is, he's here somewhere, but like he had said, if we go to Gwinnett County Police Department and we say, we're looking at pulling out of your municipal police department, forming our own, because these are the challenges, I think that gives them incentive to work with us and say, what can we do to keep you here? I think that they are bigger and stronger with more cities and municipalities as part of them. And I also feel that, sorry about this, I also feel too that if we pull away from them, we have a potential of weakening them. If we offer bigger, better salaries to our Peachtree Corners police, we also have a potential of weakening them. We are Gwinnett County as well, and we want the best for all of Gwinnett County as much as we want the best for Peachtree Corners. So I don't want to be throwing out the baby with the bathwater versus looking at this holistically and seeing how can we best solve these problems or challenges, or what I'd really like to say is opportunities, because as people have pointed out, I don't see that we have a problem to solve as much as a situation to monitor and to continue to optimize, and to do it at an optimal rate. I know one of the things that you said that would pay for this is to potentially eliminate homestead exemptions and other exemptions. I want to eliminate my homestead exemption and start paying more, everybody else. So, I just don't want to. I mean, if I can keep my rates down, I got other things to spend money on or to save money on. So, it's all good thoughts, but again, let's not just look at this one solution to improve the challenges. One other thing too that you talked about, Brian, was a challenge where the county cannot enforce city laws or city ordinances. One of them that you brought up was the Airbnb VRBO. I didn't know about that. The only other law or ordinance, I don't know what to call it, I'm sorry, that I know of that the city has that the county doesn't is chickens. We're not, this is serious to some people. I don't have an opinion on it, but Peachtree Corners says we're not allowed to have chickens. I think Gwinnett County allows that. Are there other ordinances that Peachtree Corners has that Gwinnett County doesn't, that we need to make sure that we address enforcing? And are there ways to do that? The other thing that you talked about is the communications, the visibility. You talked about the read-only access. We are the city of technology, or what is the word? I don't know what the word is. Technology, innovation, city of innovation. Mike. Huh? Yeah, city of innovation. So there's an opportunity for us. We have an opportunity to continue to pursue that, break down that barrier, solve that problem. I will volunteer.
Be careful what you volunteer for.
I will. I'll
Thank
send
you
you a
for your
message.
comments. All right,
So thank
yes,
you. I'm
yes.
sure I had more.
But I'm available if you want to meet, at
I'm
another
happy.
time. Those are good comments.
And,
but-
and I appreciate it.
Okay,
And I
thank you.
appreciate
Thank you.
everything. Thank you very much.
First, I'd like to thank the Peachtree Corners leadership for considering these things and presenting it to us. Thank you for the information. I'm going to keep this short and sweet because Peachtree Corners, I love living here and it's so diverse. We have a lot of Asian, Pacific, Korean, and all that. And this is all in English. What are we doing for accessibility to allow the entire city to have the opportunity to chime in on the decision we make?
Good point. I'd like to talk to you about this afterwards, but we can certainly do something to ensure that those who, English is a second language or other things
Wanna
get
be
an
inclusive.
opportunity to weigh in. Good point.
Thank you.
Yep.
I'm going to just ask a question here, which is taking on the theme of technology. What role, like the model that we seem to present today, focused on what I'd call the older model of policing that doesn't necessarily focus on technology. So I'd like to challenge you guys to elaborate. What role does technology play in policing? Because we have an opportunity in creating a new police force, a new concept. Please address that as well. So I'd like to see how we're going to step into the future.
Yeah, so I'll address it a little bit. And I think that even came up in the first comments that were made, talking about doing things a little bit different. Keep in mind the work that we do when we build an agency or we assess an agency is based upon industry best practices that are known to work. There have been a number of technology introductions into police work that have been tremendous force multipliers in terms of making police departments more efficient. I can tell you right now, I'm aware of a city in California that has essentially a virtual fence around their city. You can't come or go in and out of their city without them knowing your license plate, without them knowing that you're moving. They can have drones over any crime scene literally within 2 minutes. And it's phenomenal the level of technology and the layers of safety that it has incorporated into that. It's a very wealthy city. But here's the challenge, is that we haven't seen anywhere where that technology has truly reduced workload. And in fact, even in that city, they will say that the fact that they now can solve almost 100% of their crimes because of the technology layers, it has increased the workload on their existing investigators and those types of things. So there's not a lot of data in the world of technology introduced in the police work. There's a lot of data that it's improved work. Sorry about that, I got my phone going off. It has improved work, but it has not necessarily lessened workload. In most cases, it's increased. One area that is emerging is AI was brought up. There are technologies that are emerging right now where they are taking officers' body camera footage, and AI is basically able to produce a police report from that videotaped encounter. And there are some very promising things that officers that have tested it, that are using it, that are saying that it is getting them 70 to 80% of a finished product in a report. That's tremendous. It's not eliminating it. And body cameras in and of themselves, I would say, has actually increased workload in policing quite significantly in the last 15 to 20 years.
I'll add, prior to my retirement from Gwinnett County, I actually helped build a lot of the ecosystem here in the Peachtree Corners. That was adding the 52 flock cameras, pan tilt zoom trailers that you strategically see around the city. It's because we've identified hot spots in the city and we place those. We're running drone programs. Jared spoke about AI. We actually have a company called Scientific who we are working with out of Curiosity Labs that's actually doing that currently with our video cams, our body cams now. So we're running a lot of technology as it is, and we'll just continue to build on it. I actually wrote my dissertation on policing technologies. So we have grown that, and we will exponentially grow that if we move forward. If the community and you do decide to go that way, that would come with it. We would run drone as a first responder program. Our neighbor to our south is tremendous. You have the city of Brookhaven. The city of Brookhaven that's down to our south, they're one of the biggest innovators in the metro Atlanta area, flying drones, and they're actually able to reduce the call volume 20% of the time because they're flying a drone to an incident of a call and it's broken up and it's gone. So you don't have officers rushing with blue lights, endangering themselves and the citizens because they've deployed a drone and done some overwatch to see what's going on there and canceling the call. But then also the same when you have people, like it was said, that we're importing crime coming from, other areas coming into the city. The drones are a great tool to put up in those areas and look and find suspects going in, breaking into cars, breaking into homes, all those different things. So it would just grow that even more.
I'm Dottie, and I've lived in I've lived in the city for 37 years, was in the city. But is this some issue that the people in charge of the city would consider putting on a ballot if this continues to be in discussion?
You have,
They are working on those things. However, the sharing of that information is where we're having problems. Like the city of Peachtree Corners stood up, gave a bunch of technology to the Gwinnett County Police Department for them to use, but it's not reciprocating in the other way, unfortunately. That's, I wish you would, thank you.
Hi, my name is Pat Camerling. I've lived in Peachtree Corners for 32 years. And my hat's off to Gwinnett County. They do a great job. I was the liaison officer for our COPS program for a couple of years. I know some of these guys, see them all the time. And they do offer a lot of programs that a smaller department would not be able to offer to small communities. Safety inspections, gun safety, all kinds of small programs that impact individuals on a day-to-day basis. Several people have talked about this, but I would like to make an official ask that before we have another meeting, we look at renegotiating our contract with Gwinnett County. If we're now paying them $2.9 million and we're looking at investing another, rounded off to $10 million to have our own police department, if we negotiated a higher percentage for them, but we requested a certain number of officers in our quadrant at all times, I'd like to see what those numbers look like and what those negotiations look like before we talk about this again.
Okay.
Have any of you had to call 911 lately? It won't even, I mean, you can forget about any kind of customer service. I mean, forget it. Okay. I'm going to give you two examples of why a local police force with shorter routes, more patrol would work better. The way, okay, imagine for a minute that you have these street racers. I heard them just 2 nights ago, I heard the street racers on Holcomb Bridge Road near Peachtree Corners Circle. And they were raising hell and riding around, and they have no regard for the law whatsoever. And we're calling 911, and it's a joke. I mean, it's literally a joke. There is no chance anything's going to happen. And the people doing the street racing know that, and they move on. They move on. They do their dirty work, and they move on because they know that they're going to have a certain amount of time. But if there was a local patrols and so forth, they'd be trapped. They would. And well, you know what? We'd have to have some kind of a change with that too, because we would have to be able to. Well, put it this way: okay, well, how about this? 911 would call the local police, right? The ones that have the jurisdiction. Okay, so you're saying that 911 doesn't call the police that would be on the ground nearest. You're saying they don't. They do. They do, and they would, and you'd have. Okay, what I'm saying respectfully, with all due respect, you'd have twice the number of patrol officers and shorter routes. Please think about that. Okay, another one would be, we hear gunfire, pow, pow, pow. Okay, it's coming from the apartments on the backside of Lock Ridge Forest. Do you think that becomes a statistic? No, that goes into thin air. There's people shooting, rapid fire like what gangs do. And it's happening right there, and they're getting away with it because of the time it takes to go do something about it. And then you got to, while the situation is fresh, you've got to be able to get witnesses and people, and you got to try to do something about it. That can be done better with a small local police force, a whole lot better, and you'd have twice as many officers to do it. So we know that we'd get, it would be almost the same amount of money, and you'd get much better quality. If that matters to you, if you're serious about policing, then you have a choice.
Thank you. All right. I want to really thank you all for showing, up tonight. That means you're civically active, from, the entire city council here to the leadership of Gwinnett County PD. This is impressive. Again, this is the beginning of a community dialogue. So there is no impending decision of any kind. There could certainly be even more, events or meetings or whatever, depending on what city council wants to do. But, for tonight, I think we probably hit terminal velocity on this. So thank you. Have a great evening, and we look forward to communicating with, you going forward. So thank you. Thank you. Good job.